Welcome to Big Blend Radio, where we celebrate variety and how it adds spice to quality of life. Everybody, it is the fourth Sunday of the month. So that means Joey Stuckey is back here on our Big Daily Blend show. And today's show, we are going to dedicate it to American music, the musicians that created the sounds of the different regions of our country, because August is American Artists Appreciation Month. And that means painters, poets, musicians, songwriters, you name it, writers, all of them are in this wonderful world of America and creating music, and that's what we're celebrating. So we've got Joey Stuckey. As you know, he is the music ambassador of Macon, Georgia, which is the Southern rock capital of the world. He is an award-winning blind guitarist, songwriter, singer, composer, producer, sound engineer. He can play with a bunch of knobs in a recording studio, and he's blind. He knows how to make good music. He's got awesome ears. He's an amazing songwriter. And you've got to go get his Live from Macon, Georgia EP out that is out now. So go to joeystuckey.com. That is Stuckey. Yeah, like those signs you see on the billboards when you travel around the South. When you see those signs, you're supposed to pull over and go see the Stuckeys, roadside attraction, get some food, get some munchies in. So welcome back, Joey. How are you?
I'm well, my friend. It's good to be with you.
Hey, it's good to have you back. Nancy is here, back on the show.
I'm so excited.
We love it.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's so funny.
Yeah. Well, you know what? It's the only day she's doing shows now. She did some last night and then it's back to work because, you know, I keep her in a cage as we travel across the country.
I understand. I mean, you have no choice.
Well, you know, I'm like,
Thank you.
Not to be political, but I'm like Mitt Romney. You know how Mitt Romney puts dogs on the roof of his car when he travels?
I did not know that.
He did.
Oh,
Do you know he lost votes when he ran for president because of that? Because he put his dog in a crate on the roof of his car when he was out running for, you know, candidacy.
I learned something new today.
He made the dog owning population, and I shouldn't say owning, dog parent population. Right. But still, you bought your dogs, didn't you? Some people, or rescued them and paid for them. But, yeah, so that's what he did with his dog, and he lost votes over that. And I think he should if you did that. But he's not an all bad guy or anything. I'm just saying. But Nancy, no, she doesn't actually sit on the top of the car. She sits beside me and puts up with my very loud, terrible car karaoke singing. So thanks for that, Nancy. I lost my voice over it the other day.
Yeah, you went crazy.
Yeah. Well, listen, if you're going to drive the Texas Panhandle in a heat wave, what are you going to do?
Like, you've got a point. Anything to stay on the road.
Yeah.
You do what you need to do. And we've had to do a lot of cross-country drives recently, and eventually
we've done crazy stuff when we were on tour. We've done some crazy stuff just to stay awake and stay safe, you know, trying to get where we had to go. Yeah. We've done some crazy stuff. Yeah. I can't tell you. I'm saving it for my book.
Oh, come on. All right. Well, listen, we've also got Kathleen Walls here, and we've wanted Kathleen on the same show as Joey. Kathleen is a massive music lover. She was born in New Orleans, and we're going to go there in a few weeks. Seriously, we'll be there soon. Katie, that is going to be epic. So I'm calling you when we get there. But okay. Katie is an author. She's a travel writer, photographer. You can keep up with her on AmericanRoads.net. And for her books, which she writes travel books, she got travel guides, ghost stories, mysteries, fiction, nonfiction, mystery, murder, crime, because she does have that funky, cool side of her brain about crime and killings. But also her latest book is all about music. It's called American Music, Born in the USA, A History of American Music. You can get it on Amazon. That link is in the episode notes. So is Joey's and everything we talk about with links.
And I'm going to order that book today as soon as we are done with this podcast. I'm going. I'm going to get that and put it in my library. Yeah.
I got it. I got the book. And she writes not only, so when you hear about American music and Born in the USA, you think of Bruce Springsteen. Nancy loves Bruce, right? Born in the USA. But what I love about it is that she goes into the indigenous people's music. And I think the indigenous people really inspired a lot of rock and roll, quite frankly, on drum beats and all kinds of things. And I could go down that rabbit hole for years. but they are left off of the American music scene so much that they had to have their own Grammys, the NAMMYs, right? And
right.
And I'm glad they have their own too, because I think they have done so much justice to the landscape, the sound of this country. Like if you drive through certain areas, eyes open or closed, Joey, there are feelings where either way, when you drive through, or maybe not being the driver, right?
No.
Yeah, really?
Unless Joey's doing his song Blind Man Driving. But when you go through these areas, you can feel like an ancient presence. And their music, the right music fits it. You know what I mean? And I feel like their music is of the land and the heartbeat of this country, genuinely. And so I think, Katie, you did a really good job about that in your book of not ignoring that, as so many people have. So welcome back. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing fine. And when I wrote the book, I wanted to include everybody, because so much of it is just one little field, and our music is our culture. And that was really what drove me to it. Is our culture formed by the music, or is the music formed by our culture? And I grew up in the rock and roll, the Chuck Berry, the Hot Rod Ford, and did we get our Hot Rod Ford ideas from listening to Chuck Berry, or did he get his song ideas from watching a bunch of crazy teenagers drive like idiots? I have to confess, how I'm still alive when I drove like that. I had a Ford convertible, a little old red Ford convertible, and it had a police engine, and I got my share of tickets. But I couldn't resist a drag race. Anybody pulled up next to me and revved their engine, and we were off. And this was in the middle of New Orleans.
Nice.
Traffic wasn't quite as bad those days, but
wow. I love your question about what shaped what. So Joey, what about you on this? Like, what do you think? Who created the sound? Was it the culture, or the culture created the sound? Like,
well, that's a great question. I don't. It's kind of like the question that I ask my students at the beginning of a semester when I'm teaching at a university. Is what's more important, the performance or the songwriting? And I don't think I'm not sure there's a right answer. It's kind of a chicken and egg problem. But what I will say is that artists are by design people that reflect the time in which they live and work. And part of the thing that we do as artists, like part of our mission, is to sort of be able to lead you into new ways of thinking, but also to talk about the past and to preserve stories and histories. So it's an excellent question. One of the other things that's so fascinating about the era we're talking about with Chuck Berry and Little Richard and some of the other, sort of great rock and rollers, is how much they affected the rest of the English-speaking world. I'm thinking about Britain here, because the Beatles were directly influenced by Chuck Berry and Little Richard and
absolutely
and Bob Dylan, and then of course we were so enamored with the Beatles that it reversed course again. So it happens. I think it's a sort of a moon and a tide kind of thing, and I think they pull on each other.
But it's normal to be fascinated by people from outside where you grew up.
Sure.
Yeah, with the British invasion, and I love that they called it an invasion. It sounds like a bunch of bugs flying in,
Yeah.
It's so funny.
And
they invaded
remember, they were,
country.
there were groups that tried to ban them, just like with Elvis. This is terrible.
It's really interesting, because Lisa and I did live in England and had, for a couple of years, we did get to travel England, Scotland, Wales. And then, then we went to Kenya, then we went to South Africa, then we came home. And so we're all mixed up in, different cultures. And we found we didn't really have any problem getting along with people. But we saw lots of instances where people dug their heels and got stubborn over things that didn't matter.
But if you're in a party with music, man, and you're booging down, the music, I think music is
boundaries.
They talk about things like necessities in life. And I really put music and food together. It is. like air, water, shelter. Music is part of it. And when you think about the cultures that have come here, you know, we think about blues, right? Blues and jazz. I mean, they say jazz comes from here, but I'm going, whoa, it's an amalgamation of cultures that came here that created it, and off of what was going on with them at the time. So like you were talking about history, Joey, I think that's what it is, you know? And the blues, you know, it's weird for me because like I didn't really listen to the blues of America until we got here. Like I knew some of it, right? I knew some, but I was raised in the bush at the very young age, listening to black women singing and black men singing. And
they were
chanting.
singing the blues.
And it was, you know, a friend of ours, Willie Kellogg. I know I've talked about him to you before, Joey.
Yeah.
Rest in peace, Willie. He was a drummer he toured with, John Lee Hooker, the Burrito Brothers, Moby Grape, all of those guys, and, did a lot in San Diego. He was known as a
sweet guy.
And he could shuffle, and he taught me music more than anybody's ever taught me music. We'd sit, he was high all the time, but, he would teach me Sufi music, and we'd get into African music and all kinds of cultural music, because he was all about like how it is about levitation. Everything is levitation. He said, because no matter what it is, he says, no matter what it is in music, it's about levitating from the place you're in. You're allowed to go down, but then you must levitate. So everything is levitation. And no matter how I think about it now, it is that. And because cultural music sometimes come from, it's like the only way you can get through is to have some release. And that's why gospel music is such a huge thing, because you're in church and you got to find God. You got to levitate. See, you're levitating and you don't forget to put your quarters in, right? But the reality is you need to levitate, right? We all don't want to go down in the dungeons of hell or whatever, but there is this levitation, and even that hell versus heaven thing is about pulling through, moving beyond the barriers, moving beyond what is now, no matter how terrible it is. That that levitation can get you out. So when you think, for me, when I listen to the blues, I remember like just the singing in Africa of being like really out there. And then how it is transformed here, because it is different from what I heard out there, but it's reminiscent of, like, if that makes sense. But I do believe all of our music comes from levitation. We need levitation. And you could smoke weed or not, or drink or whatever, but the purest form is the purest form. Like, if you can just enjoy music and get levitated by that song, you know,
Go ahead.
I've always found art to be about hope. I mean, whether it's music or obviously, I mean, I don't really, paintings and stuff like that as a blind person don't really impact me. I can appreciate the craft and know that it's good, but that doesn't really impact me. But so for me, music's the art form that's most accessible. But I think all art is about hope, and it's about the idea of where you've been and where you are, not where you're going. And so I think that's another way of saying what you said, Lisa. And it is true. And you know, we talked about you know, the melting pot of New Orleans being kind of the generative place for what a lot of people have called the only true American art form, which is jazz. And I think there's some truth to that. I mean, I'm not a musical historian or scholar, but it seems that is a true American art form. That truly, you know, comes from our shores. So, and it's jazz has been I mean, I've started off playing sort of alternative rock, and then had a progressive rock phase, which I still love. And, you know, bands like Yes and Alan Parsons Project and King Crimson and all that stuff. And I still love that music. And then I kind of got into jazz really heavily. Part of it was because of my time at university, and you know, basically you had two choices of what you could study. You could study classical or jazz. There was really no other choice.
That would be an easy choice.
Yeah. And, well, I mean, I love classical music. I was trained classically, but the thing of it is, like, if you're play a violin or a cello or something like that, then classical has a lot of opportunity for you. If you play guitar, classical doesn't really have that same opportunity. And as much as I love classical guitar playing, there's some remarkable classical guitar players out there, but as much as I love it, the truth is that classical guitar, you really can't make the notes sing and swell, and there's only so much power you can get out of that acoustic instrument. And I wanted to bend strings and really hit some high notes fast, and I wanted to play, and I wanted to play phrases that had a lot more dissonance, and I wanted to play music that had more improvisational content where we were creating spontaneously. And so jazz was, the thing for me. And so I became a real devotee of jazz. I still am. In fact, I was just recently in the studio going through I recorded a jazz album in 2019 that's almost finished, but I got sidetracked by some other projects that I had to do for clients, and I haven't finished that record. And I've started up again working on it and trying to put its finishing touches on it. And it's a fusion record, so it's jazz, sort of jazz rock funk combination, all instrumental.
Oh, and sounds neat.
And so yeah. But I mean, I love jazz, and then I got into the blues, and what I found was that when I played blues or Americana, I found that I had a little bit wider audience that wanted to hear what I had to do, and then also. The jazz stuff, we charted at number 9 on the CMJ Top 40 Jazz charts back in 2013. And we're up there with Lee Ritenour and Dinah Kroll and, Marcus Miller and all these guys. And they all had labels and I just had me. And so we were really pleased with our progress there. So I think, anyway, my point though is that jazz was a real watershed. I said all this stuff to say that jazz was a real watershed moment for me when I discovered it. And I loved the circa 1959 sound of jazz the best. That's when you had Miles Davis do his seminal record, in my opinion, Kind of Blue. It was around that era that Dave Brubeck did his album Out of Time, or what is it called? I think it is Out of Time. Anyway, it was the album that had Take 5 on it. And that was his sort of seminal work. I had Blue Rondo a la Turk and, all that sort of stuff, and Take 5 and all those classic, Brubeck tunes. And it was around that same time that you had Giant Steps from John Coltrane. And again, around that same time that you had Sonny Rollins' Bridge album. And so to me,
and Herbie, didn't Herbie come out like kind of around then too, or even a little earlier? Herbie Hancock?
I'm not a musical historian, but I think he's a little later in the food chain, but I could be wrong about that. Don't quote me.
He's a badass.
He's great. He's absolutely fantastic. But I believe he was a little later, a little younger than those guys, but I might be wrong. Okay. I might, don't
No, I don't know.
I
just said, for me, it came in around the same time. Yeah.
Well, he certainly played with all those guys for sure. But I thought he got into his own a little bit later, like maybe we're talking 5 years later. So I'm just saying circa 1959, roughly. So 57, 60, all just in that little range there. But I know Herbie was huge in like the 70s and late 60s and then beyond. But yeah, he definitely played with Miles, and I'm trying to remember, I think, and remember, I can't read the album notes or liner notes, so I'm at a little bit disadvantaged. But I believe that it was Bill Evans that was playing with Miles on the Kind of Blue record. I'm pretty sure of that. I could be wrong, but I think I'm right.
I'll have to check that out.
But that particular record, that was such a watershed moment for me and taught me so much about improvisation, the Kind of Blue album I'm talking about. That record I'm pretty sure it was Bill Evans on piano, but I know it was Miles on trumpet. And then he had two of the greatest sax players of all time, John Coltrane and Cannonball Adderley, in that particular incarnation. And of course it changed, those guys were always forming and reforming and, groups and, Miles would play with Coltrane and Coltrane would play with Miles. And those guys were always forming and reforming and doing different sort of iterations the groups they put together. But anyway, yeah, I love jazz as an American art form. I think the 50s rock, was definitely an American art form as well. And, Katie
but it comes from
more about that
regions
than I do.
too. Because if you think about
absolutely.
jazz, I mean, I got to go to Katie on this in New Orleans. I mean, Dixieland jazz and one of the very first jazz albums, I believe, was a Dixie jazz band. The very first jazz album ever recorded in this country was Dixie jazz, I believe. I have to go back on some history.
I don't remember for sure, but it was such a blend. I mean, sometimes it's really hard to say where a musician fits. I mean, Ray Charles, sure, he sang blues, but then Ray Charles and Willie Nelson. Willie Nelson's country.
Sure. Yeah.
When Willie Nelson, that song, that it's not the good life, but it's my life. I mean, that's blues. That's not country. I mean, it was just such a merger. The Seven Spanish Angels.
Chris Stapleton. I'm so sorry. Chris Stapleton is not a country musician in my book at all.
No.
He is old school R&B with soul and blues and rock in there.
It's really hard to fit him in one category. And Tina Turner, where do you put Tina Turner? I mean, definitely she fits rock and roll. Definitely she fits blues.
She's at the top in my book.
But I mean, to fit her in one category is impossible. She's not.
It's really
just
tough.
one.
And getting back to Willie Nelson, I mean, he wrote some hits for Patsy Cline. So I mean, he was. Which Patsy Cline's music was country, but it was also pop.
No.
You can't categorize.
And Nashville told Willie Nelson, "Oh, you can't sing; just keep writing." I mean, it wasn't until he left and went to Texas and said when the Highwayman music, which I really loved when that came out, because that was
great. Waylon Jennings.
Yeah, it was such a rebellion. I'm not going to do everything by the book. I'm going to do it my way.
Absolutely.
That's one of my favorite eras in music, and the protest music, Woody Guthrie and those. I mean, that really made an impression on politics at the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can't talk politics, but I mean, that was a whole different era of politics with the Vietnam War. And these people were standing up and singing, what, this isn't right. Do what's right.
However, on Nancy's side, and she's growing up in the 60s and 70s on the West Coast, California, she's bebopping to Jan and Dean and the Beach Boys and all of that, right, Nancy? So you had
I had this piano teacher, then it was all classics. And then one day she turned to me and she says, "You look bored." I'm like, you think? Not that I don't like classics, but
classical.
Yeah, classical music. It just was 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you got lucky, you could play a waltz, and change the time for a change. But, no, because it would just, it started to kind of sound the same on the piano. And then, so she said, "Well, you watch TV, pick a theme from a TV show you like and take."
A Lone Ranger.
No, Peter Gunn. Peter Gunn, and I took the bass line from that and put it to one of Beethoven's symphonies. It didn't work out that great, but it was fun trying.
That's great.
The lyrics are such a big part of the music.
Yeah,
to me,
it's a good exercise to break out of the box you've been put into. I found
that's what the Highwaymen did. That's what I really liked about. But
I love that.
With writers,
the Highwaymen.
When you think of the song "Respect," everybody thinks of Aretha Franklin, but it wasn't him. It was Otis Redding that wrote the song,
right? Yeah,
the writers don't get the credit that they really should get.
Perfect example is Howard Tate.
Has a lot to do with it.
Howard Tate, and this is why I love Bonnie Raitt, because of what she did with musicians and especially Black women musicians and getting them their place. And Ry Cooder has done so much. Ry Cooder, when we talk about Americana, I think he should be, he needs statues everywhere. Like we put up, all these Confederate dudes. Let's put up, Ry Cooder everywhere, because he has really been a champion of American roots music all the way to, Cuba. And look what he did with the Buena Vista Social Club. And he is he understands Norteño. He understands blues. He understands Texas style, and he gets it, But, Howard Tate was on our show many years ago when we first started, and may he rest in peace. He passed away, I think, a year or 2 years after, not because of our show, but he wrote "Get It While You Can."
He hasn't killed anybody yet.
Yeah, no, but he wrote "Get It While You Can," and Janis Joplin made that song. We've got to think like Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix. Look at the people we have in music of this country, right? Jim Morrison. You want to take Jim Morrison? He was inspired by Native Americans and Muddy Water, and he put them together, But when you look at this with Howard Tate, he was a forgotten soul man who did this amazing music. He ended up in the streets and drugs, and then became a preacher and cleaned up and all of that. And, and he came on the show. It was really even difficult. We were live, and he didn't understand how it all worked. It was just like a whole different world. And, it was just good I wish we could even find that archive. It's got to be in our storage unit. Have that slice of American history of understanding these, musicians who maybe will make a song famous, but understand those writers like you're talking about. Like, I don't think even people understand how much Carole King wrote in history.
She wrote a lot. Yeah.
Everything. Good Lord. Like, seriously, I think, Katie, when you talk about understanding the songwriters behind things, Janis made what? Oh my God, now I'm going to forget the song. Me and Bobby McGee famous for Chris Christopherson.
Yeah. And so many people have recorded. Chris Christopherson wrote it.
Yeah, that's my favorite. Right there.
Oh, so many
going
people
in on that.
Recorded. But the thing with the music, so much of it, everything has grown out of, the African American enslaved people singing out in the fields and the country music people, you think two different worlds, but yet Hank Williams learned to play his guitar from a older black man taught him how to, and the music blended, and the country music all blended the rock music, and it just grew. And it became, it's still growing and evolving.
Is that not a good thing to talk about today's culture of so much?
It is, bias? Because it shows we all part of it. It's all, the thing I always think about, guys, is getting off of music a little bit, but when people talk about immigrants, unless we're Native American, all of us have come from people that have come from other countries.
Absolutely.
They came here.
Absolutely.
And they brought their music with them. That's right. Like the Scotch and the Irish brought their fiddles along. They couldn't bring pianos. They were too big. They didn't have the money. They came in steerage. They got over here. They found trees. They cut them down. They built them a fiddle. The black people built their banjos out of whatever they could find. And yet all of that, and you get into Cajun music. You've got your accordion from your German immigrants. We've all brought something into the mix.
What about Hawaii?
That's why the earth is round. We were meant to travel.
Yes. Yes. Well, yeah, we are nomadic in spirit because, human beings have been nomads for centuries. So we tend to forget that. And animals are nomadic too. But I want to not forget Hawaii because of their instrumentation and slacky guitar and things like that. This is like a whole other sound that adds to the American soundscape, which is Hawaiian music. Alaska's got its own sounds going too with Native American music and also fiddle playing and things like that too, because of the immigrants that went there. We also have a lot of Asian music in our country if we tune our ears into it, which I think is something to listen to as well. What about rap? The history of rap, and we should be proud of that too. It's poetry in its own form of just, wow, wake up hip hop. We did have hip hop and rap in Africa too, very much so, in different ways. It's, to me, we've got to look at all of these like genres of it, but it's also something interesting. So Joey, you're the ambassador for music for Macon, Georgia. So you're the Southern capital of rock, right? Or the capital of Southern rock, excuse me. So we need to look regionally in the music too, because it's where people move to, right? If you look at it that way. And in the indigenous people, the sounds are different according to the tribes, to the trees that they can make flutes of, and the animals that they use for skins, for drums, all of that, right? So their sounds would be different and languages are different. But when you look at rock, Southern rock was completely different to the Beach Boys surf rock and the Ventures, people like that. Look at Neil Young and Leonard Skinner and, I'm just saying, Allman Brothers Band, that's all part of your backwoods, right, Joey? So when we even look at rock, it was different according to where it came from, wasn't it? With the musicians the
South
made that.
The South certainly put their own stamp on Southern rock, because you had a lot of the country influences, but you wanted to expand beyond those into a little bit more of a danceable music. And Alabama it's interesting. A lot of the people that we really cherish here in Macon came to Macon from Alabama. And Alabama, of course, has Muscle Shoals and all that kind of stuff.
Your sweet home, Alabama.
Yeah.
You think of Macon almost as much as you do of Alabama as the Shoals with that one.
Yeah, well, you do. And the thing is, I mean, you think of like Wet Willie, who's, I've been friends with those guys, I've opened with those guys, I've played music, done recordings with those guys. And, they came from Alabama to Macon because they felt like that's where they would have their career take off. And they said, look, we're going to give it one more shot. We've been playing. We're talented, but we're not getting anywhere. So we're going to move to Macon. And, the Allman Brothers had a similar situation. Dwayne was a Muscle Shoals session player. And they had the Almond Joys back in the Alabama days. And then they moved to Macon as well. And they're not from here, but they lived here for like a decade. The same thing with Wet Willie. And then of course, several other bands like Marshall Tucker and Loose Change and Leonard Skinner and many other.
Skinner was from Jacksonville, and
That's
you don't
right,
have a big music scene in jazz. I mean, there's a jazz festival thing, but they couldn't make it the fame that they got. They couldn't have made in Jacksonville. And what's so sad is where they used to record, which was over here in Clay County, my county, Hell House. It's a gated community and the place is torn down and there's nothing really left of it. And one of the favorite restaurants, oh God, my brain went dead all of a sudden. It's waterfront, restaurant out on the river.
Oh.
Well, I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida, and my dad actually heard Leonard Skinner rehearsing before they got big, in that area.
Wow.
So it was fun.
That's cool.
And now that's where the Tedeschi and Trucks band is. That's where they are based out of, is Jacksonville. Susan Tedeschi and Derek Trucks live out there and record out there. And I mean, that's like a big family band. I mean, I love them. They're like a big jam band too, and yet being tight. And they bring in, I think, a very American musical landscape because they go off in the different cultural styles as well, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of the Southern rock bands, became sort of jam bands, and there was a sort of blurred line between those two. You had the Grateful Dead, which I think is considered a jam band. The Allman Brothers were considered a jam band. Fish, is considered a modern jam band along with Tedeschi
So
Trucks.
the Dead was more of the South, because I always think of them in California.
No, they were California, but they were considered a jam band.
Jerry Garcia has his own highway getting into San Diego.
They were not Southern, but they influenced a lot of people in the way they ran their enterprise.
Yeah.
And so
but the sound of where musicians are based and the music that came out, I'm like, I understand that there's like this culture, and it goes back to your book, Katie, about who influenced who, but I also believe the landscape influenced it, because when you think of grunge, right, it comes out of Seattle, grunge music and even alternative rock kind of came out of that area. And alternative rock also from some of our British countries and European countries, and pop is different over there too. I mean, if you think dance music kind of, it's interesting, right? Then you go
EDM
south.
is very European.
Yeah. And then you go to Nancy's side, Southern California. They're like, hey, we're at the beach, man. We're having a good time. And San Francisco saying, hey, we're having an uprising. We're going to create, and Nancy was having sit-ins where she was, she would sneak out and go on Sunset Strip at night when she was a teenager and get herself in trouble.
No, my brother and I used to sneak out the window, walk about 15 blocks, end up on Sunset Strip, and we used to peer in restaurant windows to see what famous people were eating what.
Did you go to the Rainbow Room?
Yeah. We did everything down the Strip on both sides.
And you saw weird stuff,
and the security guards just used to give us candy. They were nice to us, and they would just say, now, don't you tell your parents what you're doing, because you're going to so get in trouble. And we're like, yeah, but it was about the music and the fame, and there was actors, actresses, and musicians, and because we came from the wrong side of the tracks, basically. So that was our way of seeing something we'd never get to see.
Yeah. I mean, it's entertainment, right?
It's interesting, too, because we're talking about all these different regional things, which is, from a musical history standpoint, we think about ancient music like Greece and how we have what's called modal music in jazz. And Greece was the origin of the modal music, and it was very, very different music depending on what region you're from. I mean, extremely different, not just a little different. It was extremely different. And they believed that, soldiers should listen to one kind of music and artists should listen to another kind of music, and those things would help them. It was, yeah. And they believed that those things would help you be a better whatever you were. But one of the things, so that's sort of an extreme regional separation. And we've been talking today about different regions. But the interesting thing is, since the real proliferation of the internet and social media, the regions are becoming less significant. And I think things are becoming a lot more blended, to some degree more homogenized, but the influences are really spilling all over the place. I mean, it's you can hear a band that's from the UK and think they're from, California or whatever. So there's a lot of that going on now as well. So it's which I think, I think it's a double-edged sword. It can be a very good thing to have this amazing amalgamation, because music does have no boundaries. That's true. So that's really cool that there's all these different influences that are feeding each other more than they have in the past. But of course, the problem with that is that you sometimes lose your local flavor. Interestingly, that hasn't happened in Macon as much as one would think, because the majority of bands in town are still Southern rock or country. Not all of them, but the vast majority of the bands in town are still making the same music they made back in the 70s. And so that's kind of an interesting little, cornucopia of a slice of life here. But there's alternative rock bands and jazz bands and stuff like that too. I'm not saying it's all Southern rock, but there's still a very heavy concentration of Southern rock and country here in this middle Georgia area.
Yeah, you do. And you can hear it on the radio as we travel. For sure. I can tell you who sucks on the radio across the country. I almost want to do a You Suck radio map of this country, of people just buying the same play. I mean, I don't even understand why they're buying a playlist. It's anyway. I don't even. That's a whole.
I don't know.
Rant.
I haven't been in terrestrial radio for a while. Last time I was in terrestrial radio was 2000. I promote my records to radio all the time. But back when I was in the terrestrial radio game, which was I was a DJ and a host and all this stuff from like 96 to 2000. I can tell you that most stations had no local programming control. They were mostly being programmed by somebody somebody in Macon, somebody in Chicago was making decisions for music from Macon. And I always thought that was a bad idea.
I think it's a bad idea.
Radio has not gotten better, because, back in the mid to late 90s, there was a loosening of FCC rules. And so now you have like 2 or 3 corporations owning, 70% of all the radio.
Well, that's what's happening to our internet too.
Yeah. And so that's kind of the problem. and it's a shame because, the local color, the local flavor, I think radio has really, since we have internet radio now, we have satellite radio now, we have Spotify, we have Pandora and all this stuff. I think the only place for terrestrial radio, meaning AM, FM, the only place for terrestrial radio is to provide that local color. And if they're not doing that, I'm not sure how much longer they're going to last.
Well, it's always the college towns.
It's like newspapers. They're just falling apart because there's no market that can support the individual.
Well, it's a scary thing.
Newspapers.
It's a scary thing that we're doing this balance of, yes, we can have the world at our fingertips, but you should know what's in your backwoods, right? And because we're in Arkansas, I can say backwoods. But this is hey, we're in Hot Springs area. And by the way, speaking of American music, Tony Bennett sang here one night. And that's when his San Francisco song came from here because somebody said, hey, I think you should sing this. And he did, and he ended up recording it. And that's what made him famous here in Hot Springs. Moved on from there. Anyway, just a little history. But the reality of this, where when we travel, if you go to a capital city or a college city, you will find once in a blue moon some music that somebody is doing locally. Silver City, New Mexico manages to get all the way to Las Cruces, New Mexico. And they play all kinds of stuff. And then they'll put like Britney Spears on the middle. And you're like, why? Or Taylor Swift. Did I say that? Oh, she's doing, I think that's another thing that we're seeing power women change up the landscape too. In American
9
culture.
times out of 10, when we put on the radio, I know within 2 hours, we're going to hear Hotel California.
It happens, but when you go to college
and I like
towns,
the song, but enough is enough.
But college towns, you will hear stuff. And that, I will never, ever, ever, and I never tire of telling this. We were going, to the Everglades. Is this when we started our tour? Back in 2012. And I think we weren't even on the tour yet. And we were going to the Everglades we were going to Miami to do a podcast at a garden expo. And then on the way back, we went to Lake Charles, Louisiana, in Southwest Louisiana. Now, Southwest Louisiana gets swampy and cool, right? It is. It's cool. It's Lafayette is, just, east of it.
That's the heart of Cajun country. So you're going to hear a different kind of music there for sure.
And so we were early to do our media trip thing, and we were supposed to check into this casino on the water, and Nancy and I were like, well, let's take these back roads in. And we went through from a town called Rice, which there's now a rum distillery out near there, by the way, everybody, and it's fantastic.
Oh, yes.
You've been there,
I've got a bottle of that in my cabinet.
Well, I'm coming to see you, girl. Nancy will be there before me.
Anytime.
Nancy had a good time there, and I had to drag her out. But we went driving to the casino, taking all these back roads, and I felt like I came home. Like, I felt like, oh, I'm home now. It was just real back roads. There were people fishing off the canals for dinner, catfishing, and there were houses like going fry fish on Fridays at this time. Like, it was just real backwoodsy cool stuff, right? And I looked at Nancy, I'm like, I didn't know America had this anymore, other than if you go in the Southwest in some areas, you'll find old trading posts and stuff like that, which it's sadly, those are like, we've lost our juke joints, it's the same kind of thing. Anyway, the college town takes over PBS at times, or NPR, excuse me, and has a channel, and they found all these swamp pop records, like in the archives, that were over like 100 years old. No joke. I'm not kidding you. These things were 100 on down, like to present time. And they just said, we're just going to start, we're just playing them. we were just going to read them and play them. And that's what they were doing. And we were driving around and I'm like, Nancy, do we really have to go to the casino and check in? Can we just because we were in the landscape of where these records were created. And awesome. It wasn't some big fancy recording studio. This was so real and you could hear the scratches and it was like, you can't stop the car. You want to keep driving. Like, I don't even want to do the media trip right now. I just want to do this. And I couldn't stop all through the media trip. I'm asking people about their music and people are looking at me like I'm frigging nuts. I'm like, I don't, whatever. I know you want to show us all this, but this is something nobody else has. What you have is incredible. Mm-hmm. And it changed me. And I think, Joey, I've talked to you about it and I've always wanted to do a show on this regionality because it is a portion of history. And it's great that we have the internet. It's great that things are blended and global, but we cannot lose our roots. And I think as people move to places, it does change them in their music. So I don't think we'll ever totally lose it because wherever you live rubs off on you. However, as we lose our downtowns and we lose like the integrity of place, we're going to lose the integrity of the arts of where we are.
Well,
right?
it's one of those things like when I was in my 20s, I was playing on a cruise ship and I was so excited to go somewhere different to the Bahamas. Mm. And when I stepped off the cruise ship, the first thing I saw was a Wendy's and a Hard Rock Cafe.
Oh, no.
And I was so depressed by that. I was so depressed by it because what I wanted was an authentic experience of somewhere different. And then there was this homogenized. When I go to the UK now, like one of the big things in the UK, Kentucky Fried Chicken and McDonald's.
No.
And it's just like, I was like, it's so distressing. So, but I think you're right. I mean, there is, inevitably, as culture spreads and as we are become more interconnected, there's inevitably going to be that sort of smearing, that sort of blurring of lines. But I think it's important for people to protect their roots and protect that sound, and because it does mean something. So I definitely agree with that.
Well, I want to go.
I was in New Iberia. I was in New Iberia, Louisiana, not too long ago. It's a tiny little town, and I'd never been there. But it just really felt like you stepped back into another time. It was just kept that real little town feeling.
I love that about Louisiana. I think Louisiana has kept hold on to who Louisiana is more than a lot of places in this country. I think they're the top 10.
Some of your rural Tennessee places. I'm trying to remember exactly what part of Tennessee, but the
moonshine part.
Pretty much out in the
Bristol. What about Bristol? Bristol was a huge place for recording.
Well,
right?
Bristol is fantastic because of that country music, the cradle of country music, but it's still a big city, kind of, and you never know if you're in Tennessee or Virginia. But some of the towns that you get on the outskirts of these places, that's where, to me, where you feel, you're in a real place. It's not all McDonald's and Wendy's and stuff.
Well, I do want to give a shout out to the Midwest. And it's kind of like, I think we've talked a lot about the South, right? And a little bit of California and stuff. But if you look at the top part of the country.
Kansas.
You look
Kansas I had some of the weirdest places I'd never even imagined existed in Kansas, but it was so much fun.
But musically, the Midwest has produced some amazing music, and we get musicians on the show all the time, and I go like, what the heck is in the water in the Midwest? Then I go, you guys are all snowed in for half the year. And we go back to the levitation, right? You need music to levitate yourself out of the cold winters, which Nancy and I have experienced now. And and the same as grunge music in the Pacific Northwest. I mean, I love both areas, but in the winter, it's a climb because it's very dark and dreary and cold, wet, cold. And so it gets your bones. And so I think music is this levitation. And I don't know about the East Coast, but I know the East Coast, like Florida was like this hotbed of music but then people would go from, up and down, and then punk started happening up in like the Boston area or something, right? Joey, do you know about that area? Like, there's certain. I mean, you've got New York City too.
There was a really big punk scene in New York, I know. Where Blondie and a lot of those guys came from in the 70s, New York Dolls, and there was a big punk scene in the UK. I don't really know. That's not my specialty, but certainly there were regions for it. And there was some punk going on in LA that became a real big punk scene at one point.
Yeah, I've got it. And then you got like the hard rock, and you got like LA Guns coming in and people like that. And look at, oh my gosh, Ozzy comes over from a different country, right? Here he comes. But at the same time, we had like Bang the Band, who was on our show. Remember, Nancy? And all we kept saying to them is like, are you going to bang the band? Anyway, sorry. But anyway, it was a naughty show. But I mean, those guys were actually our first metal band in this country that, as they know of it, and that did pyrotechnics and all kinds of stuff. They were blowing stuff up on stage, and they only got into this country. They got into it. They got on stage because they were higher than heck. They got stoned in Daytona Beach at some event. I don't know. They got high, saw a poster for some concert and said, well, we're just going to go play this concert, because they were in Daytona to play a concert. They didn't, for some reason, whatever happened, it didn't work out. So they got stoned in their little tent and saw this sign at the grocery store, like a, 7-Eleven kind of thing, saying something about some concert. They were like, well, we need to go and we'll just go play there. So they drove there and they went there, and they just took someone's set and they became a band from that. They stole the set. Some story like that. It's a crazy story, but they only did one album and should be far bigger than what they ever became. They were incredibly amazing. And so everyone check out Bang the Band. Just Google that and listen to their music.
I never heard of them.
No, they've been on our show. Frank Ferrara.
Oh, that's funny.
And I mean, they went out with bell bottoms and stiletto heels, and they blew stuff up, man. They did. I mean, I think that's pretty
crazy,
because I think it's fun once in a while to have things, but I do some extra craziness. It's part of like the history of music, right? It's like Jimi Hendrix burning his guitar. I'd try to save the guitar. I probably would be one of those weirdos that would jump on stage trying to save the guitar that he's burning.
I could not do that to an
instrument. I can't stand that. Yeah. I hate that. I really, don't do it.
Well, he claimed that he had to sacrifice something he loved, but to me, I think it was just more of a publicity stunt than anything.
Yeah, he was smart. Yeah, he was smart. But, let's also touch on Canadians coming over. So North America, we've got these two border countries, right? We've got Mexico, which has influenced American music as well. And we've got certainly Canadian music. The Mexican sound, the Puerto Rican, the Cuban music, and then Hawaii, like I said, which obviously is still part of this country, and Puerto Rico is too. But these border areas, or outlying, whatever you want to call them, floating islands, they have influenced us as well. So much music that we consider American is from Canadians. Alanis Morissette, we claim her, but she's Canadian. We claim Shania Twain, she's Canadian. I mean, we claim so many Canadians. It's not funny. Yeah.
And of course, Rush.
Oh, that's right.
Are they Canadian?
They are.
Wow. Yeah.
But really, that's America. Canada is America. We just sort of claim it, all for ourselves.
What?
Right.
Mexico really are America. I've had Canadian friends that have they haven't really argued it, but they've said, we're America too, And they are, I mean.
Well, and then Mexico, the Mexican music, I mean, listen, there's so many, we have a huge population of Mexican people in our country who do so much for our country. And one of the best things that they brought in is not only themselves, but their music. And
the food.
The food. Are you kidding me?
The old Marty Robbins music used to bring in so much of that Mexican sound. I loved his music.
Johnny Cash did that too, and I think he got that because of Willie Nelson. I think Willie Nelson kind of nudged him in that direction. I'm just thinking. I don't know. But, I mean, that's the one thing about going across Texas. Depending on where you're driving, you can hear papa music, and then you got to think Pennsylvania and the polka and all of that too. All the European music that we bring in. Basically, you could just do a big musical road trip. Nancy, I think we're going to have to do a musical roadmap. What do you think?
Oh, yeah, for sure. It'd be fun.
Yeah. And all the extra time you have in your day.
Yeah. But we always have these huge projects, and it's fun because you learn so much and it always comes as a complete shock. Who was born where? Mm-hmm. And especially when it comes to the music world where America we own it all.
Well, you've been doing all the research on you've been doing the research on the Jefferson Highway, and I know I've talked about that with both of you. So the Jefferson Highway goes from Winnipeg to New Orleans. And this is our first vacation route. It started in 1915. It predates Route 66. And Nancy and I are tasked with doing the very first actual official visitor guide for this that will come out next year. And Nancy this is where she's really not been on top of the car like Mitt Romney's dog. But she's been down the biggest rabbit hole. And I mean, you did get a list of musicians on the Jefferson Highway, right? Just out of the curiosity,
Well, I'm still making it up. I have 1.5 more states to finish. So I'm making a list of the towns that are I'm following the list of the towns that are on the Jefferson Highway and looking at what famous people were born where. So, it makes me laugh because I find out certain people were born in the same city, in the same era, like Ronald Reagan and Tiny Tim. I'm sorry, but
that's a different combination.
I know. So it's like, what the heck was going on over there? It's interesting. And I mean, Andy Williams and people, really famous singers, songwriter people.
What's the music maker man, up in Mason City, Iowa? Sondheim? Am I going to get it?
I haven't done all of Iowa. I've got a little bit of Iowa, 2 cities left to do. And then I have Missouri what's the last one? I don't know. I've been doing it too long.
Kansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, Texas. Oh, Minnesota too. Minnesota, you've got Prince. Come on.
I know. I'm getting there.
We got Arkansas too. But in Iowa, Mason City, Iowa. So this is going back to the old rock and roll time. This is where they crashed. Big Bopper, G. Valens, and Buddy Holly. They crashed.
Buddy Holly,
yeah, and the pilot too. They crashed there. They did a show at the surf ballroom, and then they crashed there. And you can go there, but you have to trek in. It's a hike to where, because the airplane didn't do it just on the side of the road for you to go to the crash site.
Yeah, plane crashes aren't convenient like that.
They're not. But they are there. It's there. But Iowa, Mason City, Iowa. I mean, that's what I'm saying is I think that sometimes we forget that I don't think the Midwest gets enough coverage and recognition. And I just feel like sometimes we always think about music being in the big cities, and we forget about the little places where people come from and the places where the music is brewed. I mean, Joey, do you feel that way even about Macon? Is Macon always just been known that way? Because it's not like you're like a massive, massive city, right? Macon? I mean, you're a city.
No, I think there's 200,000 people, something like that. We're known fairly well in some of the southern states, like Florida, the Carolinas, Alabama, Tennessee. You get past that, they don't necessarily know the city, but they do know the artists from here: Little Richard, Otis Redding, Allman Brothers, Johnny Jenkins, all the Jason Aldean's sort of a recent Maconite. So they certainly know the artists. And when you say, an hour south of Atlanta, and then here's some of the music that's come from here, all of a sudden, now you're having a conversation. But it's always, at least since I've been here since I was 15 years old. I'm in my late 40s now. So at least since I've been here, it's been known for that. And also, there's been a wonderful organization, the Georgia Allman Brothers Band Association. And they have made sure that people remember the Allman Brothers, and of course remember the Allman Brothers' stomping ground of Macon, Georgia. They have the big house that they do a lot of projects with, and they have what's called GABA Fest, where they celebrate Southern rock music, and they bring in, it's kind of like the sci-fi conventions and stuff. People come in and they have memorabilia they sell, and they have concerts, and they have all that kind of stuff. And so it's always been known for.
Joey would like sci-fi to be combined. Thank you very much.
I would. But it's like that. It's pretty cool. So it started off pretty small. It got bigger. It's sort of waxed and waned over the years. Some years are bigger, some years are smaller. But it's pretty great. And we also have another festival here that does really well. That's a little bit more forward thinking as far as musical sounds and style. It's called Brag Jam. And that's kind of kind of bringing a lot of bands that are kind of on their way up, a little bit more underground, along with a lot of local bands as well. And then, there's a couple other festivals here. There's the Blue Sky Festival, which celebrates the Southern rock and blues. There's Joey Stuckey Alive Day, which typically that is that is actually multi-genre, because that's how my spirit works. Everything from hip hop to classic country. And it's more about the spirit of the performers wanting to give back to the community and wanting to celebrate the joy of life. But those are a lot of festivals here. I mean, there's a lot of things that remind people. Now we do have the Georgia Sports Hall of Fame still here in Macon. But two of the things that Macon has lost that used to help us stay on the map a little bit more was the Georgia Music Hall of Fame. And we also used to have the Macon Braves, which was the AAA team for the Braves. That team is now in Gwinnett and has been for quite some time. But anyway, but it's always been known as a music city since I was coming up. Even though the one thing that I'll say, the only thing that separates Macon from Nashville, LA, New York, name any music city you want, is we don't have the infrastructure. There is not enough music lessons, music studios, music rehearsal spaces, venues. All those things are still not at the strength they need to be. So, for example, if I have something go wrong in my studio, I have to call a guy from 2.5 hours away to come fix it. There's nobody local that has those chops to do what I need to do. Whereas in New York, you probably have 100 people that could do it,
Yeah.
So we've been working ever since I've been in the music business here. I've been getting paid to play since I was about 18 or 19 years old. And, ever since I've been in the business, that's one of the things we've worked on tirelessly, a handful of people, is to try and bring that infrastructure to town. And it's gotten better. I mean, every 3 or 4 years, it gets better and better and better. So we're making progress. But it's a very difficult thing to do, to bring infrastructure to a location. So anyway,
No, that's awesome though.
Yeah.
But that's it. I think we're going to have to do our show where we do this, where we go around the country and do American music. I think it's going to happen. I don't know. We just keep doing new shows, Nancy. I don't know how, but we'll just keep doing it. I just really think so. I think it's so important that, and I think you've brought up such a good point, Joey, about this, like with the internet and everything. I mean, there's an amazing band out of the Redwoods that we love. Oh my God. And they just, like, that having been there, that I literally smell the dirt. I can't explain it because it's not quite this, it's not quite that, but they're in this in between zones of musical areas. And yeah, we're going to have to do this. We're going to have to finally do this. And I think this show is just it's somebody pushed a poker on my butt right now, not up my butt, but on my butt. Nudge.
Oh.
I know. But in closing, you guys, because we could talk about music in America all day long, right? And we can't leave. I mean, we've got funk. We've got then we've got all the crazy places that held the music, right? We're going to have to do something special. Joey, it's your fault.
There's a great, I'm glad to be the culprit. There's a great animated series, that was created by the guy that created Beavis and Butthead and King of the
Nancy,
Hill.
There you go.
And it's called On. I think it's called. I'm pretty sure it's called On the Bus. So look it up, and it has a wonderful deep dive into some of the major characters when it comes to authentic country music, outlaw type music, and when it comes to funk music from the U.S. And so it's a
George
wonderful
Clinton.
deep dive series. Yeah.
Can we talk about George Clinton and Macy Gray getting on I don't know why this is funny to me, but I would like to have been there. They got on a horse-drawn carriage. They were in New Orleans, I think it was, or Savannah or somewhere. They were going to some show and they were like, well, we're going to do this. Or they went on a carriage. Macy Gray, George Clinton, and smoked a big fat joint and went on this carriage ride to the show. And just went but a long carriage ride, obviously, and had a good time at the show. I would have loved to have been a fly in that carriage to hear that conversation. I probably guess it's going to be a lot of giggles.
That's what I was thinking.
But I mean, those two together, it's kind of an interesting blend for music, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, it's like, come on, the Grammys are so much more fun. It used to be so much more. Like when you got the Oscars and everything so la-di-da, but the Grammys, everybody would be like, oh yeah, watch this. I don't know about award shows anymore. I don't have much to say that's positive about them. And I think the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame needs to step up. Tom Morello, I thought was changing it. Then he got an award and I don't know. I don't know what's going on with the awards. But I would like to say that blues should be televised. And jazz should be televised and not left out of, it shouldn't. When we talk about American music and Grammys, and these are, music awards for here. And I know, Joey, you're on the board and all that stuff, but can you fix it?
I probably cannot.
They don't let you do it all on your own.
Okay.
Yeah, I got my hands full working on accessibility.
I know I've got a good question for each of you to close off, but what do you think about the awards? You do a lot on the Grammy stuff, and what I see is that the Grammys do a lot of good in giving back. I want to acknowledge that.
Big time. Yeah.
But how are we now? How are you feeling about the Grammy Awards themselves? Are we getting better of recognition of independence and blues musicians, cultural music, that kind of thing?
Yeah,
I don't want to get you in trouble.
No. I mean, the Grammy Awards have made a lot of progress as far as inclusivity is concerned, and that is an ongoing project. No matter who you are, I think that's an ongoing project. And I should say that anything I say is not. I'm not officially representing NARIS or the Grammys when I speak about this. But the fact of the matter is, I'm a governor on the board, but like I said, these are my opinions and not those of the Grammys. But I'm really pleased. And one of the reasons I think it's so important for people like me or anyone to become involved in their community is so that you can make changes that you want to see from the inside. And so for me, the thing that I'm really working on is educating on accessibility, because If you are not disabled, then it's very difficult to understand the struggle. And so I think that's the same when it comes to any kind of project, whether it's inclusivity or any of that stuff, or getting more airtime for blues and stuff like that. At the end of the night, I think it's an award show, and that the goal is to play the most popular music, get the most eyes on the TV show, and recognize the artists who have done the most visible work. So it's no surprise to see Taylor Swift, on the Grammys. That's the Grammy Award show. They do have a lot of awards that are given out during the day in official ceremonies that are not televised. And one of the things I'd like to see, I think would be really cool, is if we, like with Peacock and the Olympics, there were a lot of things that didn't get primetime viewing or even cable viewing that you could go on the Peacock app and watch if you wanted to. And I think, because there are like the dressage and the horses and stuff like that. I don't think they got prime time. I could be wrong about this, but I don't believe that the dressage and the canoeing got prime time access. It was more things like track and field, volleyball, some of the diving, certainly the Olympics, some soccer, but like the dressage, the archery. All that stuff was available for you on the app. So I would love to see, for those of us that are blues aficionados or jazz aficionados or whatever, I would love to see those other ceremonies be broadcast as well. And to have what the other ceremonies don't have, because there's a massive number of awards to get through. It would be great if we could have a weekend of it. But I would love to see some performances happening on some of those smaller genres as well.
I agree.
And so I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's a logistics issue. But I would love to see, it would be cool if you could, we have Grammy Week, which is where there are a lot of parties. There's a lot of cool things at the Grammy Museum. There's a lot of things like with Music Cares or Music Cares, where they give a lot back to the community, and they give a lot to, like musicians that are down on their luck or having health struggles. So there's a lot of investment in education. So all that's awesome, but it would be way cool. And I don't know that it's possible, but it would be way cool to extend the opportunity to see those broadcasts for those of us that love new age music or those of us that love blues. And I mean, like hardcore blues fans, world music. It would be really
classical.
Wonderful. Yeah, absolutely classical. It'd be wonderful to get a chance to see not only those awards, but also some performances. And so I always go to the award show that's not televised as well, so I can see some of my friends, and so I can, hear about some of the cool music that's being recognized. But I would love to see a little bit slower pace on those. And I would love to see some performances as well. So, yeah, but it's nothing's perfect till you work on it long enough. So I think
that's a good point.
Yeah, it takes continual work and trial and conversation. But I do think that award shows without like looking at the Oscars, and this is just, I'm a blind guy, so I don't get to look at the dresses or the tuxedos or the beautiful people and look and go, well, I wish I had that figure or whatever. So award shows without performances, to me, have less value. That's why I think what the Grammys are doing is so exciting, because there are actual live performances. And when you're, and I don't know how it translates on television, but when you're in the room and those performances are going on, like earlier this year, when Stevie Wonder was in the room playing the grand piano.
My God.
Oh man, it was, I was in the room, and I was, 1,000 feet away from him, but, I was in the room with it, and it was really magical. And it was really magical to hear, some of the other artists performing stuff. It was really cool. And there's a spectacle of it as well, which of course I can't really appreciate either the visuals. But it's cool. So I think award shows that have something to offer besides just recognizing the artist have value if there's other content, like you get a chance to hear somebody really speak for a few minutes about the film or what's important to them. I think all that's important. But I think if you're able to have an actual performance during the award show, that to me makes it really cool.
It's always a performance. And I think what's hard is that they record it as like it's set up for the audience and then also TV, and you can't do both. Because
it is really hard to do both. And I mean,
it sucks because even SNL, the musicians on SNL, I mean, a lot of them, their careers are like blossom from being on SNL, but the sound always sucks on SNL. I'm sorry, but it does. It sucks. The sound.
I'll tell you that I don't know if you've been to the SNL studio. I went to it when I took a tour of the NBC building, and we went to the studio so we could see how big that space is. It's small. It is a very small space, and getting the sound right for that space and then getting it right for TV is probably a real challenge.
It is, because it's like you have a live audience and then you have this, and it's two different sound things to do. You know, if it was just channeling it just to record for an album, that's different, you know?
Oh, totally different. Yeah.
All right. I know, Nancy, you had something to say. I think, Katie, you had something to say, and then we got to close off. But Nancy?
You asked me to look at California musicians.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I came up with the Ventures.
Okay.
Jimi Hendrix was Washington, but it's still on the West Coast, so I'm including him. The Beach Boys and Creedence Clearwater.
Oh, we gotta leave. Creedence is Creedence is everything.
Hendrix has a cool tie to Macon because he was a guitar player for Little Richard for a while.
That's right. And hey, Sheryl Crow was the backup singer for Michael Jackson. How about that? Like,
very true.
You know, we forget about that about her. So, Katie, did you have something on the Grammys? Otherwise, I'm going to go to our next question to close out. Or
I think we've covered so much of everything. I mean,
it's crazy, isn't it? We can't even stop.
It is.
We could keep talking
there's so
all day
much
long.
Of music.
You were just on our national park show, and like I could just keep going because this is
same thing. Yes, so much there.
I know, but it's so cool. These things are so cool, and to have these conversations are awesome. So closing question from each of you. Okay. Pick an American musician, band, whatever, right? A solo person or their band or an ensemble, an orchestra, I don't care what it is, that you want to see perform in person, live, right? Or here.
Do they have to be living or dead?
It doesn't matter. I don't care. But you're going to go to where are you going to actually attend their live performance? Where are you going? In America, right? We're going to keep this in America. So we're going to talk about the venue and the space and where they're from. Because let's think about that. Like, look at the musicians and where they're from and where you want to see them. You know, like Nancy's, the Hollywood Bowl was her backyard too. There's all kinds of places, or the Sunset Strip, right? And then there's the Cat House, Nancy. Anyway, that's a whole other story. Yeah. Oh, Ricky Rockman was on our show like about a year ago, I think it was. Yeah. He's crazy. The Headbangers Ball. I don't know if people like metal music.
Oh, I remember it well. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So let's start with you, Katie. Who do you want to see perform and where?
Ooh. Well, it's more, I wish I could have seen Johnny Cash perform. Big fan of his and loved his music. I've never seen him perform, and I would have settled for anywhere. Recently I got to see Willie Nelson, and that was in St. Augustine at the amphitheater. He put on a great show.
Did any of his kids come with him? Micah or Lucas?
Mike, both the two boys. And the thing I liked the most about him, the young lady who was his opening act, you know how so many musicians just sort of brush off the opening act when she's finished? He didn't. At the end of the show, he brought her back Casey, and I don't remember her last name, but she was very talented. And he invited her back onto the show and did the closing number with her on stage.
He's been very good about helping musicians rise up.
Yes.
I think David Grohl has been very good about that. as well.
Yes.
You know, and Lucas Nelson was on our show. How many years ago, cool. Nancy? 10 years? I don't know how many years. 5 years? 6 years? 7 years?
You think it's that long?
But Lucas Nelson, I think, is someone to watch guitar-wise. Lucas Nelson, The Promise of the Real, they're going on hiatus after this summer as a band, but he's getting so involved in Nashville and writing for people. Like he wrote and helped with the what is the Bradley Cooper thing with Lady Gaga?
Shallows.
Yeah, he did that and won a Grammy for it, or Oscar or Grammy or something, but also was the advisor for them. And he got left off I watched it just to see if he was going to make it on there on TV. No. You know, it's like, that's what we talk about. All the writers and the people behind, you just don't see it as much. And I get it while you can't, but it's up to us, I think, as music lovers to learn more and try and discover those people. And we'll keep sharing them on our show as much as we can. That's what we can do. So what about you, Joey? Who do you want to experience?
It's a tie, actually. I would love to see Billy Joel at Madison Square Garden. That's one. But the other person that I would really love to see is Miles Davis. I would love to just see him. And I'm a big fan of New York City, of Manhattan. And I think there's so many amazing spaces there. But the Lincoln Center is a great place to experience jazz. So I probably want to see Miles at the jazz at Lincoln Center. Cause it's just a cool place. Dizzy's Club is there. And, it's just a great area. So those are my two American musics that I haven't got a chance to see. I mean, that would be fantastic.
Nancy, what about you?
That's really hard. I have to say 3 people.
Oh, good Lord.
Now, Chris Christopherson obviously has to be there. Jimi Hendrix. Okay. And, I have a hard time narrowing down to one person. Dean Martin.
I knew you had to bring him up. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would like it just to happen in my living room, wherever that may be at the time.
So she could just have her cocktail and be
That's a good idea.
Yeah, that is. I think that's cool. Can they all be on the same night? It's like, yeah, that's a badass house concert. I'm going to have to go with, it's really hard. I would do anything to see Ry Cooder. I'd like to go to the Old Grey Whistle test. He performed it was a band that also helped in the songs of Crossroads, the movie Crossroads, with Ralph Macchio in there, and
that's a great movie.
It is a fantastic album. But what's on the album is not what was on the movie, and was not what is on the Old Grey Whistle test, right? And so Terry Evans is this incredible, amazing singer, and I had this slight opportunity to interview him, and then he died. But he sang Down in Mississippi. Like, if you Google that on YouTube, it so just good. Moves you. Is probably one of the best vocal performances ever, to me personally. And as well as the band. But I just would like to see Ry Cooder, because he brings the cultures to the forefront. He doesn't let these cultures die off, their music die off. He brings it to the forefront. What he did with Buena Vista Social Club, I thought, was so incredible. Then other musicians have gone there too. Like, he's done a lot in Africa, and Paul Simon has done it, but there's something very authentic about Ry Cooder, about what he does, and he knows how to play slide. So I would like him anywhere. I would like to go back to that for a specific show, actually, to be there at the Old Grey Whistle. But I'd also like to see what would happen if we put Ry Cooder, Ryan Bingham, and Lucas Nelson in the same room.
Oh, what would happen? Interesting.
Hell, like, they can all play guitar, right? So I would like that. And then, because it's like guitar, is like a voice. It's a cry. It's a sexually like intriguing sound. So yeah, let's just close it with that, America. Let's all go have sex now. So anyway, closing that off. Hey, music is sexual. Have we forgotten that? It's not just about the plight of the people. People need to have some sex.
It's really interesting. It's interesting you say that because I've done this entire podcast with no pants.
Oh, well, that's good. Well, I won't. I'm not going to even go there because I'm going to start.
You shouldn't.
I can't.
You shouldn't.
No. We're going to behave because I'm going to behave.
You have a dirty mind.
I know. Katie's blushing. I can see her on video here.
Poor
Nobody
Katie.
else can, but she's blushing. Sorry, Katie.
Oh no, it takes a lot to make me blush.
I know. But listen, thank you so much, Katie, and what you've written. And I want to give everyone the link out again. Go to Amazon or go to KatieWalls.com. Kathleen Walls is the name on the book, the author. We call her Katie. It's American Music, Born in the USA, A History of American Music. You can get it on Kindle too. Joey Stuckey, keep up with Joey at joeystuckey.com. They're both on social media and both part of Big Blend Radio. So if you go to blendradioandtv.com, just type in Kathleen, type in Joey, you'll find them. And we thank you both for joining us on the show today. I know this is going to grow into a whole other specialty show. I know it is because it just has to. It must. I must.
Oh boy.
Uh-oh. Hickory dickory dock. Okay. I'll behave now. And you know where I was going, Joey. I know you do. I know. You know that, right? From John Cleese, Hickory dickory dock.
Of course.
I know. Okay. I'll behave. Everyone, thank you so much for listening to us here on Big Blend Radio's Big Daily Blend Show. Joey is here every fourth Sunday where we get to close off the month in some kind of shenanigans. So thanks so much, everybody.
And thank you for having me.
Guys.
Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio. Keep up with our shows at bigblendradio.com.